Welcome to this episode of the Affluent Entrepreneur Show. This one's a special one. It's especially curated and crafted just for you as part of my money mentorship series that I'm doing right now. A series of specific trainings choreographed just for you to help you move you along the path to financial freedom. And if you haven't been part of our live, exclusive, and private money mentoring coffee chats on Fridays, you need to be. So here's what I want you to do. Click the link, get on the list. I will send you the private link so it can be you, me, a small group of people in a Zoom room having conversations around money, around investing, around your financial future, and a different financial destiny. I'll see you there. Welcome to this special series, Wealth by the Decade. This was a special one that I think is really important. But here's the thing. At the beginning of each of these episodes, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, I talk about what does it take for you to build wealth, no matter the age or stage. So it's the foundational elements. What that means for you is this. If you listen to one of the episodes from the prior decades, maybe you listen to the 30s, and now you want to listen to the 40s, that beginning's going to be the same. So just skip ahead and get to the core content for your decade. But if you haven't listened to the setup, make sure you listen to the setup at least once, because that's the foundation to make sure that you build wealth in the decade you're in. Enjoy the episode. Hey there, welcome to this episode of the Affluent Entrepreneur Show. This is the beginning of a special series. Often I get asked, what do you do in your 20s, your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s? What do we do? Depending on your stage or age in life. And the reality is that you can't figure out your wealth journey, the things you should be doing with your money, if you don't look at it from the context and the construct of where you are in your life, how much time you have left, and those kinds of things. So I decided to create a special series called Wealth by the Decade. And so I'm going to walk you through some of the key elements that you need to consider as you start to look at your wealth, depending on where you are in your life. Now, before you go jumping ahead and saying, well, I'm not in my 20s, or I'm not in my 30s, or I'm not in my 40s, and skipping those parts of the series, there's some valuable elements that build on each other going through the whole series. So I'm going to invite you to go through the absolute whole series, no matter what your age is, no matter what decade you're in. It can also help that maybe you have children or grandchildren that need to hear some of this stuff. So I want you to go through all of it and take the notes. I'm going to walk you through a couple of things. Each decade, we're going to talk about the theme of that decade. We're going to talk about the focus for that decade. We're going to talk about the priority for that decade. We're going to talk tactically about what you need to do for that decade. And then we're going to talk about some cautions. What are the things you need to watch out for in each decade? This is going to be powerful. This is going to be incredible, I think, because it's one of the things that I get asked most often. But before we do that, I want to set up kind of the whole idea of wealth creation, at least the fundamentals, because no matter what your age or stage or whatever decade you're in, this applies. And so I want to talk about the wealth triad, the wealth drivers triad, and what are the stages, what I call the journey, the financial liberation journey, so you understand where you might be and what to do. So in order to do that, I'm going to actually jump to my iPad and walk through some of the things that I think we need to bring into bear. So here's the thing. When we start to look at this and we start to look at what drives wealth, because this is going to impact everything that you do, is that there are truly three wealth drivers that we can have that drive things. And so the first, and this is the thing that most people think that they need, and that is this. It is all about money. And I get it. We need to have money. We need to have income. We need to have money coming in to make that happen. But if you've watched me for any length of time, or if you've seen some of the work that I've done, it's not the money that's the sole contributor to building wealth. Look, we want wealth not because we want wealth. Now, some people maybe, but not me. I want wealth so it allows me to get behind the causes, to move my missions forward, to create a movement, to have the moments in my life and to control those moments. Maybe you're the same way. The reality is that the reason we want money is a result, it is not a purpose, is to fulfill a purpose. It could be to take care of our children, our grandchildren, to get behind a movement. It could simply be to sit back and say, I just want to control my life, whatever it is. There's something beyond the money. And so although money is a necessary ingredient to building wealth, it's not the only ingredient, because we can have lots of money coming in, and if we have lots of money going out, we're not building wealth. So that's the one ingredient, first ingredient. The second ingredient that we need to consider is time. And that is this, is that, and I hear this all the time, people that are younger, they're in their 20s or 30s or even their 40s, and say, I got time. I got time. Or I hear people that are in their 50s and 60s and say, it's too late. I don't have time. Well, the fact of the matter is, time is what it is. It's a factor we can't control. We are at a certain age and stage in our life. Period. End of story. But, and I want you to hear this really clearly, it is never too early to start. Okay? It is never too early to start building wealth. Time is the greatest lever you have to creating wealth. So the earlier start, the easier it is. The less money we have to bring in. It goes back to my whole Emily factor when we talked about my granddaughter being born. And the fact is that if all I did was put away, $100 a month, $20,000 over 20 years, and just did that, she'll have $1.6 million by the time she was ready to retire. And it's because time did the heavy lifting, 20,000 to $1.6 million. If we started that at 30 or 40 or 50, it's a little bit of a heavier lift. Time is the greatest lever when it comes to your wealth building. Now, that also means this. The best time to get into the investing game, the best time to get into the wealth creation game is now. If we didn't do it yesterday, then now. Because here's the thing. If we don't get into it now, then it's just going to shorten the runway, and it's going to make it a bit more difficult as we get older. Now, it doesn't mean it's impossible, okay? It just means it's more difficult. So why do the heavy lifting? Let time do the heavy lifting for you. So money, time, and number 3, that nasty word, discipline. Let me tell you, this is the place where I think a lot of people fall off, is the discipline. There's a study that was done, 10,000 millionaires. It was done, and literally the majority of those millionaires, they weren't like entrepreneurs. They weren't, mega entrepreneurs that sold their companies for hundreds of millions of dollars. They were wage earners that consistently and persistently put money away over time in their 401k, in their investment accounts, and everything, and they ended up becoming millionaires over time. Discipline is one of the greatest catalysts to building wealth. Here's the thing. Remember, I said wealth is not about the money, it is a behavioral issue. Well, discipline is about your behaviors. If we don't get in the game early, or if we don't get in the game now, whatever the age or stage you're at, and stay disciplined in the game of wealth creation, then what happens is you make money, you lose money. You make money, you build wealth. You lose wealth, you build wealth. But what happens is it's an up and down, and you don't necessarily get ahead. So when you have the 3 key ingredients of money, time, and discipline, things shift for you. Now let's look at what happens when you have these things in place. Because if we truly have money and time, what it gives us is leverage. It gives us leverage. The time does the heavy lifting. Now I don't have to be feel the burden of putting so much away, time will do it. I'm going to give you some numbers as we go through each of the decades here. Okay. Now, when we have money and discipline, in other words, the discipline of our spending, the discipline of our earnings, and the discipline of our investing. We have money coming in, we have money going out, and we have money staying home, hopefully. And it's the money that's staying home, what we do with that, that starts to create the wealth, building the money machine that's going to give you the freedom, the wealth machine that gives you the freedom to choose, to have the option to work because you want to, not because you need to be able to decide whether you're going to take a project on or not, to decide that you're going to take a month off, like my son and his wife are doing, and going to Portugal. We're going to join them, so those kinds of things. And what that means is that when you manage your income, your inflows and your outflows effectively, and what's staying at home, you're creating margin in your life, but you're doing it from a financial standpoint also. And so this starts to really drive things. Now, when you have discipline and time, what happens is you start to create habits, and those habits give you consistency. And this, my friends, this is the key. These are the three wealth drivers. When we start to understand how to manage all of these, and time is always going to be defined as now. It's never too early. It's never too late. It's now. Okay. So hopefully this makes sense to you. Now, there are stages to go through. And I've had so many people that say, what's my financial freedom number? Okay. What's my FI number, my FIRE number, all that stuff. And sometimes those numbers can get really large, which means that they feel so far away. And so you're in many cases sitting back saying, I don't think I never get there. But I want to bring something to you. I want to give you kind of the 4 stages, the 4 steps you have to go through. Because let's face it, whether you're in debt or whether you have hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, if we need to get to $1,000, we pass through $100. If we need to get to $10,000, we pass through $100, then that $1,000, then $5,000, and we get to $10,000. If we need to get to $1 million, we have to pass through the 100, the 1,000, the 10,000, the 100,000, the 500,000 to get there. Realize that it's a journey. It's not a destination, and there are milestones in this journey that I call the financial liberation journey. And I think that when you start to understand that all I'm trying to do is get to the next milestone, then I'll worry about the next milestone and then the next. When we turn around and say, I got to get to 5 million, if that's the number, it feels lofty and unreachable and impossible. And so too often we stop. But what we need to do is put little milestones that say, oh, I'm on track. I'm doing well. And then before you know it, your discipline, your money, and your time get you to the 5 million. And you go, gosh, how did I get here? Well, you got there by moving through the 4 stages of the financial liberation journey. So let's look at them. Because here's the thing. When we talk about the financial liberation journey, and this is financial liberation. This is the journey, the path. And so here's the thing. We have to move through each of the stages. And you might find yourself in one of these stages, and none of them are good, bad, or indifferent. It just allows you to understand where you are, what your focus is, and what to do next. And so hopefully this will start to make sense to you and give you some ways to look at it. The very first stage that we have to pass through, that $100, if you will, is what I call financial stability. And what is financial stability? Financial stability is when you have enough assets generating enough income that it actually covers your necessities. I mean necessities. That means the roof over your head, the food that you're eating, your medical, your transportation, your shelter, your clothing, the necessities, the bottom rung of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Once we have that, that's the stability. Those are the things that we need to take care of. Now all of a sudden you say, I'm stable. My necessities, my survival is covered. Okay? And if we have our survival covered, it gives a level of peace of mind. We know that we're okay. Now, it may not be the lifestyle we want. It may not be the lifestyle we have currently. But at least we're not on the street. At least we're not in debt. At least we're not struggling to just survive. So we need to get to that stability line first. And so if you're in debt or you're struggling, you're living check to check, there's some things that we need to do to get some things dialed in. We'll talk about those decade by decade. And then, because then once we get to the stability stage, we can move to the next stage. And that next stage is what I call financial security. And financial security, if financial stability is your necessities, financial security is your current expenses, your current lifestyle expenses, if you will. And so if I look at it, and let me just throw some numbers to it, if my survival, my rent or my mortgage, my medical, my food, my clothing, transportation, let's say that was $2,000. Okay, so I would need to generate enough income, $2,000. If I did that, then I am at the financial stability line. But that's just the necessities. What about things like Netflix and mani-pedis and other luxuries and and the gym membership and all those things? Those are lifestyle expenses. Those are lifestyle expenses. They're not necessities. Now I get it. You might say to me, Mel, it's necessary. I get it. All right. But the reality is they're not. But those are lifestyle expenses. This is where we have to get to for financial security, where we can support our current lifestyle. Hopefully this makes sense. So our current lifestyle is then supported. Now we have financial security because now we sit back and say, I can keep living this lifestyle without having to worry. And so if our necessities were $2,000, and let's say that in order to continue our lifestyle, including the necessities, it's $5,000. That means that I need $3,000 more. So your financial security is a total of $5,000, which is the $3,000 for lifestyle and the $2,000 for financial stability. Now we're doing well. Now we're at the security line. Now we know that our current lifestyle is safe. That leads us to stage number 3. Stage number 3 is financial independence. So stage number 3, financial independence, is where we have enough income being generated to replace 100% of the income that we currently have. So let's keep with the numbers. $2,000 for necessities, another $3,000 for security, so that's a total of $5,000. But let's say you're earning $7,000 a month. Well, financial independence replaces the income that you have, which is $7,000, which allows you to pay for the expenses that are necessities and lifestyle and have money left over. Okay, and have money left over. So financial independence here is replacing the income, and let's say that that is $7,000. Okay, so that is the financial independence line, which then leads us to this last place, which is what I call financial freedom. The financial freedom is when we have the opportunity and the ability to fund our, what we call an affluence vision. When I work with people in the affluence blueprint or with my one-on-one clients, we create the vision for their life, the ultimate vision. So this is the lofty goals that allow you to do the things you want to do, get behind the missions, the movements, and do things without concern. This is the big kahuna, the big number that you're looking for. So it supports everything. So you're completely free. You can live life on your terms the way you want. Okay. That number could be anything, but we have to figure it out. Too often we don't know what our target is, so we just keep running. I did that. And so the idea here is this, is that to understand that this is a journey that requires you to go through stages. And it's not just you jump up to financial freedom. So when we do this and when we look at the stages and the decades of our life, we start to look at it through these eyes to understand that I'm going to be, whether I'm at the stability stage or security stage or independence stage or freedom stage, we're at different stages. Totally fine. The fact that you know what stage you're at allows you to know what the next milestone is. Okay. So that's the financial liberation journey. And I think when you look at the 3 wealth drivers and the journey, now you understand some of the elements that come into play with building wealth. All right. So with that, let's jump to the decades. All right. This is flying along the decades. We're now in the 50s, what I call the flying 50s. Things are changing in life at this point. This is when we start to really take a hard look at our financial situation because reality's setting in. That maybe retirement or your later years are coming in. What do we need to do? So let's just go back to how we do this again and say, well, what's the theme? What is the theme for the 50s for this decade? Well, the theme here, okay, the theme is really about scale. This is a time where I want you to start scaling, not your life, but your wealth. So this is the time where we're starting to dial in our expense structure, but expand our wealth structure. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. In order to do that, there's going to be 3 focuses here. The first, again, is your why. Revisit your why. Why are you doing it? At this stage, at 50 years old, you might start becoming grandparents. So all of a sudden generations are starting to grow, and you've got to think about that. I just went through that this past year. I've got my first granddaughter will be 1 year old soon. I got a second granddaughter coming. So all of a sudden I started to realize that, wait, there's another 80 years of Abrahams on this earth. Holy moly. How do I serve? How do I care for them? How do I support them? It's about scale. Scaling your wealth, scaling your generosity, scaling that. What is the why behind that? All right. And here's a time where, again, we go to a second focus, which has been in every decade, and that is education again. Podcasts, shows, books, courses. Some of them might be different. Now is the time where you're starting to look at other things that might be impacting you at this stage of your life. Okay? Because the last focus that we need to start thinking about is recalibration. Recalibration our life. What do we want that to look like? Recalibrating our plans, our financial plans. Now we're getting closer. The runway's getting shorter and shorter. We can see where we're going a little more readily. We can see the environment we're operating in more clearly. What are our desires? Maybe they've changed. I got married late. I got married at 50. I got married in this decade. Things changed. Okay. What are the obligations? So we need to recalibrate all this, the life, the plans, the desires, the obligations to make that happen. That leads me to priorities. And there's 4 main priorities in the 50s. And the first one's a big one, is really about risk management. I mean, when we talk about these priorities, if we can sustain ourselves when we're younger, we can rebuild when we're younger because we have time to fix the mistakes that we made. And unfortunately, when we start to get into this decade, especially the latter part of this decade, we don't have the runway to fix things as much. So we need to be really diligent about risk management. Not only how much risk I can tolerate, but how much risk I can take, called risk capacity. I did a whole video, session on navigating the risk triad. So I'll make sure that we hook that up after this episode so you can get access to that. But understanding what your risk capacity is, your capacity to sustain yourself if we have a downturn, if we have a loss, those kinds of things. So risk management becomes one of the top priorities at this stage of your life. And then this is the time where we start to re-educate ourselves or start to reacclimate ourselves from this idea of becoming wealthy to staying wealthy, because they're 2 different things. See, becoming wealthy is about the generate pillar of the affluence blueprint, as well as the accumulate pillar. Staying wealthy is about the accumulate pillar and the insulate pillar. We got to do both, but this is a time when we start to transition, say, how do we stay, if we become wealthy, how do we stay wealthy in the process? So now we need to start transitioning our mindset, our education set, because the skills, the knowledge, the mindset around creating wealth is different than keeping wealth. And it's different when we go beyond this to start spending the wealth. And we need to make those transitions. Okay, so this is something that we need to start thinking about here. Also, there's a second transition. That is, this is a time where we're going to start transitioning our attitude of necessity to work to desire to work, where we're sitting back saying, look, now I'm starting to get into the 50s, and I want to start looking at what does life look like if I don't have the necessity to work? What am I going to do? Where does that go in the next stage, if you will? And then the last priority, so risk management, becoming wealthy versus staying wealthy, the transition of necessity to work, and then the last priority is knowing definitively where you are on the journey based upon your detailed plan that you have in place. Because now you can make those adjustments. If we don't know where we are in the plan towards our finish line, then we start to have problems. So we need to know more definitively in the 50s where we are. So tactically, what do you need to do? Tactically, again, peace of mind fund, 12 to 18 months. I want that in place, okay? Continue your investing. Unless you've completely obliterated your number, continue the investing, 20 to 30% going in. If you are behind on your wealth creation and the number that you're trying to get to, I want you to push to the upper side of that, or even more if you can. Consistent, tactic number 3 is consistent network worth tracking. You should be tracking it annually, minimum. At this stage, I'd probably push it to quarterly, so you are in the game and know exactly where you are on this space. And you couple the net worth tracking with this next tactic of having a detailed plan. At this stage, we need a detailed plan because we're getting closer to trying to land this plane. And so as we get closer to try and land this plane, we need to know where the runway is. We need to know where the airport is. We need to know that we're in the right city, and the right plane, the right runway, all of those things. We need to land this plane. The only way we're going to do that is making sure that you have a detailed plan in place to do that. Now, this is a time, though, when we have the detailed plan, and I just went through this with my wealth strategy team, is that I want you to stress test the plan. What does that mean? That means that they look at the plan and they run the numbers under worst case scenario, best case, probable case, and they are hitting it with everything. Like if you retired at the worst time, if you retired at the best time, if the market drops 30%, if the market drops 20%, if it goes up 20%, I want you to stress test the heck out of the plan to make sure that based upon the analysis, the probability of you achieving your goals financially is high. They run what's called Monte Carlo analysis on my stuff, where we are beating it up left, right, and every which way. And then I'm asking questions, and we're running scenarios, and what happens if expenses are here, and what happens if, and we are stressing it out so I don't stress out. Does that make sense? So what I want them to do is I want to take that detailed plan and I want to put it under pressure and say, what happens if things don't go right? My dad retired, and shortly after he retired, the market dropped. And so did his retirement. Now, he didn't have any of these principles in place. He didn't have this stuff in place. He didn't have a detailed plan. He didn't stress test the plan. He didn't have an advisor. He didn't have the things that I'm telling you to do to keep you safe and keep you moving forward. And because of that, the amount he had went down. Now, fortunate enough, it was still enough for them to live a decent life. And, you know, and he had a pension and all that stuff. But it could have been easier. Stress test your plan. Okay? Stress test the plan. Then from there, once you have that information, you now have the ability to make some adjustments. Adjust your savings and your investing to fit the plan, to hit the targets with a higher probability in doing that. Now, during this time, you're still investing. You're still maxing out the retirement. You're still putting it in Roth if you can. You know, hopefully your income is at a high enough level that you can't, or your tax rate is at a high enough level that that it doesn't make sense. Maxing out the match and using the investments in that way. And this is also a decade where you start to look at, again, deeper into the asset allocation and the asset location. Is it in tax-free accounts, tax-deferred accounts, or after-tax accounts? They all have different tax structures and they affect your plan. For instance, and I'll tell you specifically with mine. We're looking at the graph of my plan as we're stress testing it, and there's a time where we run out of the after-tax money. That's the money I never pay tax. I pay tax on it already, so I don't have to pay tax on it again. And we dig into the tax-deferred money. Well, the tax-deferred money, every dollar I take out is getting hit with 35% or more tax. So I got to take out 40%, 50% more just to have the money, and that starts to drain things a little differently. So you need to kind of consider where the asset allocation and location are to make that happen. That means tactically you probably need an advisor, a mentor, a coach, a financial coach, someone to help you out, to do the stress testing, to do the plans, to help you out in this process. And that leads me to the last two tactics here, which is something you're going to do every decade. It started last decade, and that is adjust the insurances you need, adjust your estate documents. So this is a time to review your estate documents, your trusts, and the beneficiaries and all of that. You're going to review your insurance and say, do I need more? Do I not need more? Do I, stuff expiring? Am I still insurable? All those things start to come into play in the 50s to start to get in place. So those are the tactics we need to have in place. What are the cautions? The cautions here are effectively the same as they were last decade. Lifestyle creep, When lifestyle gets away from you, your expenses get away from you. Okay. Complexity creep. When things get complex, they become cumbersome and they can cost you. Impatience. When we get impatient with our investment growth, we make bad decisions. And leverage. We don't over leverage. This is not a time to go into crazy debt and borrowing because you're now in your 50s. Getting more debt that is 20 years, 30 years of a mortgage puts you into your 70s and 80s. We don't want that burden. Okay. So we need to think about it from that perspective. So in the 50s, we're really starting to drill down, dial in, and make sure that we've got some things in place. Detailed plan, stress tested, knowing what our target number is, making sure the investments are fitting what we're trying to accomplish, managing our risk in the process, and making sure that we know what our asset allocation, asset location, and doing it from that perspective. Now, I just want to touch on some things. If you feel like you're behind with respect to wealth creation in this decade, in the next couple of decades, here's some things I want you to consider. One, income has to become your priority. I need you to start to look for ways to increase your income, and scale your cash flow. That might mean that you have to develop a side hustle. You might become a gig worker where you're taking on contracts that are separate and apart of what you're doing to bring in extra cash. It may be temporary, but it's to get you over that hump. Or you might have to take on a second job. And I know none of this probably sounds great, except that if you're trying to do a side hustle that you're going to convert into a more permanent thing. But we're trying to solve a problem of saying, I'm underfunded right now. I want to try and catch up. So income becomes the priority at this stage. The second thing to consider is expense management is the next priority. That means I want you to review every single dollar that's going out the door to see if it's necessary. Not that it's desired, but it's necessary. Am I using it? Am I getting value out of it? Do I need that subscription? Do I need that? Because if it's not necessary, we can get rid of it and we can use that money towards our investing, towards our wealth creation. And I want you to look at your living expenses and say, are there things that I can do to reduce my living expenses? In other words, am I living in an expensive place that maybe if I move a couple blocks away, a couple miles away, I can reduce my living expenses? Do I have a car? Like I've got someone that they just actually went down to one vehicle because they weren't driving. They didn't need two vehicles. Saves them $800 a month. That money's going directly into investments. And if they need another car, they'll go buy another car. But point being is to start reducing your living expenses. So income's priority 1, expense management priority 2 if we're behind. Number 3, this is really just about you trying to find some cushion. And that is looking around for non-productive assets that can bring in cash. That means selling stuff. Okay? If I went around and looked at some of the technology that I have sitting in my studio, my office that I'm not using and haven't used and probably won't use, and just listed it, I could bring in probably thousands of dollars and then take those thousands of dollars and put it in an investment account and jumpstart or move forward or leapfrog my investing. So look for non-productive assets that we can liquidate and bring money in. And then the last piece of this during this time is that all savings and additional income that's coming from priority 1, priority 2, that means your income and your expenses and even the selling of non-productive assets, needs to go into a separate account for investing automatically, out of sight, out of mind. This is the way you're going to jumpstart and then start move yourself forward. Now we can go into more details about how do you do the side hustle, what do you need to do, but we just need to get our mindset, the way we're looking at things, correct. So if you're behind, income is priority number 1, expense management priority number 2. Look for non-productive assets we can liquidate and bring cash in quickly. And number 4 is you making sure that all the savings from the expense cutting, the additional income coming in is automatically going into an investment account. This will go a long ways to helping you move forward and jump forward in your wealth creation and your money for retirement. So hopefully that helps. I hope that this is something that you're finding valuable. Now we're going. I'm going to do one more decade. We're going to talk about the 60s in the next segment. And knowing these is really important, because here's the bottom line. I want you to understand something. It's never too late. It's never too late. Whether you're in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, it's never too late. You've got to get in the game. Remember, time is your greatest lever. And time, the best time, is now. There's no reason that you sit back and say, well, I didn't do it right for 40 years or 50 years. I guess I shouldn't try. No, you should try. Because guess what? You get 20% further than you would have gotten if you didn't try. You're still 20% further along. Let's make it happen. Let's stay in the game. You're never too late. You're never too early. Now's the best time to invest. Now's the best time to create wealth. Now's the best time to get on the path to financial freedom. All right? You're not alone in this journey. Let's make sure it happens together. I hope that you found this of value. I look forward to seeing you on the journey. See you soon. Cheers. Did you know that there are 9 accelerators that can put your wealth creation in overdrive? Go figure. That becoming wealthy doesn't just happen. But here's the thing. There is a blueprint that I can actually give you towards financial liberation and the freedom you deserve. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to register for my upcoming free 3-part live training experience where we start to build real, sustainable affluence. This is going to be all about the priorities, the processes, and the principles you need to build financial freedom, and it's free. Click the link. You'll be the first on the list to get notified when this thing goes live.